Hey guys, thanks for tuning into another video. Because of 4th of July, I wanted to do something in the spirit of Independence Day and kind of reflect on the people who fought to allow Americans to have independence. So today I'm going to be reading a story of a survivor from the Revolutionary War. Before I get into the story, if you like these videos, please subscribe and hit the like button so that I know to continue to make more content like this. Alright, let's just get into the story. So the title is Surviving the Impossible, the Forgotten Soldier of the American Revolution. When we think of the American Revolution, we think of heroes like George Washington crossing the Delaware or Paul Revere's Midnight Ride. But for every famous name, there were thousands of young, hungry, freezing men who fought, marched, and survived, barely, with no glory at all. This is the story of one of them, Joseph Plumb Martin, a nobody whose words still echo today. Joseph was just 15 when he enlisted in 1776. He thought war would be glorious. Instead, he found mud, disease, hunger, and endless marches. It's hard to imagine a time like this when so many people were so young doing such big things like this, going into war at just 15. It's hard to imagine, along with the lack of good health care at this time, too. So it was kind of a miracle if you made it this far in your life, even just 15. So it's wild to think you survived all these odds of disease and whatnot, and here you are getting enlisted into the military, which I'm sure was an honor in some ways to be able to fight for your country or for the independence of your country. However, definitely a lot to deal with. Even if culture is different, people were younger doing things like it was typical for women to get pregnant and have kids at an earlier age. It doesn't change the fact of how long they've been around. So their life experience and everything is still very short. He survived the freezing winter at Valley Forge, where men boiled old shoes for soup, and wrapped rags around bleeding feet. Joseph wrote later, "We were absolutely, literally starved." Wow. I would have thought at least they could get some kind of foliage to have for food, but it was the winter, so maybe there just wasn't really any options, or maybe they weren't sure what was safe. So that's wild that they would boil old shoes just for some kind of flavor, some kind of sustenance. That's hard to believe. That's crazy. At one point, Joseph and a few other soldiers, desperate for food, slipped into enemy territory to steal corn from a British field. If they were caught, they'd be shot. But starving to death seemed worse. I have to agree with them. The slowness of starvation and the pain of it, and just the lack of ability to do anything, that would be haunting to have to deal with. So, but if they were shot, it would be kind of an instant thing. So I could kind of understand where they're coming from. They crawled on their bellies through icy mud, filled their coats with raw corn, and staggered back to camp in the dead of night. That stolen corn, barely edible, kept them alive for days. So definitely worth it. They didn't get caught, and they were able to bring it back, and it kept them going. That's also kind of wild because corn doesn't have a lot of nutrients in it. It's mostly just kind of fiber, and that's about it from what I've understood. So not a lot there in calories or nutrients. So that would be difficult to live off of. Joseph survived smallpox when it killed thousands of his friends. He survived endless battles from Brooklyn to Yorktown. He survived betrayal when Congress failed to pay its own soldiers. Sometimes they didn't even have shoes or coats in the winter. I had no idea that was a thing. Congress didn't pay its own soldiers? How could you not? They're literally fighting for you. That's disturbing on many levels, to be honest. But somehow Joseph Plumb Martin kept going, not for glory, but because he had no choice. Years later, when he was an old man nobody remembered, Joseph wrote down his story, a narrative of a revolutionary soldier. It didn't become famous in his lifetime, but today it's one of the best surviving records of what real war and survival looked like for the common man who fought for freedom. So, next time you think about American Revolution, remember the forgotten boy crawling through enemy fields for corn, fighting cold, hunger, and despair, and living to tell the story. This was Joseph Plum Martin, the invisible survivor of America's fight for independence. That is a wild story. I'm sure the book goes into more detail as far as what actually occurred and everything. So definitely check that out if that's something that interests you. There's so many stories like Joseph's that have happened to people who willingly fought for America. So I hope you like this July 4th special to kind of reflect on just one of the soldiers who endured so much to fight for this country. So to wrap up this story, I hope that you all have a wonderful time celebrating July 4th, if that is something you celebrate if you're in the US. And I hope that you're able to enjoy time with friends and family, enjoy the freedom that we do have, and that you have a great weekend. Otherwise, I will talk to you all next time. Bye.